She said, "My pets were a danger to the neighborhood." What she didn't expect was that every lie she filed would lead straight to a courtroom that understood animals better than she ever did. I run a pet daycare, not a circus, not a kennel nightmare, and definitely not the lawless operation she later tried to describe. Every morning, before the sun fully clears the roofs of the neighborhood, my driveway fills with familiar cars and familiar faces. Dogs wag at the gates. Cats peer nervously from carriers, and owners hand me leashes with the same trust parents give babysitters. These animals are not just pets. They are family members temporarily placed in my care, and I treat them that way every single day. The daycare didn't start as a business idea. It started as a favor. One neighbor asked if I could watch her dog while she worked long hospital shifts. Then a friend of a friend with a rescue that couldn't be left alone. Over time, I did everything the right way. I got licensed. I passed inspections. I invested in sound-reducing fencing, reinforced enclosures, shaded rest areas, and structured play schedules. I kept vaccination records, emergency contacts, feeding logs, behavioral notes, and daily reports. If something happened to an animal, I knew about it before anyone else. Most of the neighborhood loved it. Parents with busy schedules were relieved. Elderly residents liked seeing happy dogs instead of empty yards. Kids waved at the animals during walks. For years, there wasn't a single issue, complaint, or warning. Then she moved in. She introduced herself at an HOA meeting with a tight smile and a notebook already open. She asked pointed questions about rules, violations, and enforcement. When the meeting ended, she walked the neighborhood like an inspector, measuring fences with her eyes and noting what she thought didn't belong. At first, I didn't connect her to me. I was too busy managing feeding times, play rotations, and nap schedules. The first complaint came in the mail. It said I was creating excessive noise. No date, no time, no evidence, just a warning letter. I reviewed my logs, checked security footage, and replied politely with documentation, showing our quiet hours and decibel readings. I assumed that would be enough. It wasn't. The second complaint accused me of harboring aggressive animals. That one made my stomach drop. Aggression is a serious word in animal care. I contacted animal control myself and invited them to inspect the property. They came, walked through every enclosure, observed interactions, reviewed records, and left shaking their heads. One officer told me he wished more facilities operated like mine. A week later, another complaint arrived. This time it said I was running an illegal business from my home. That was false, provably false, and already approved by the city years earlier. I sent copies of permits, licenses, and zoning approvals. I thought facts would end the problem. They didn't. She escalated from complaints to accusations. She told neighbors that animals were escaping, that children were at risk, that diseases were spreading. None of it was true. Still, rumors don't need truth to spread. A few clients called asking questions. One asked if animal control had shut me down. Another asked if it was safe to keep bringing their dog. That hurt more than the paperwork. I doubled down on transparency. I sent weekly updates to clients. I posted inspection certificates publicly. I invited concerned neighbors to tour the facility. Some came and left reassured. She never did. Instead, she filed formal statements with the HOA and city, signing documents that claimed she had personally witnessed violations that never occurred. She described scenes that security cameras proved didn't exist. She used legal language carefully enough to sound credible, but vague enough to avoid details. Animal control came again. And again. Each time they found nothing. Each time they documented the lack of violations. Each time she filed another complaint anyway. Eventually, the HOA informed me that legal action was being pursued based on the volume of complaints. Volume, not evidence. That's when I understood what she was doing. She wasn't trying to protect the neighborhood. She was trying to bury me under paper. I hired a lawyer. I organized everything. Every inspection, every visit, every email, every complaint. I labeled binders by date and agency. I pulled security footage clips and stored them on multiple drives. I asked clients to write statements describing their experiences. Many did, some angrily, some emotionally, all honestly. Still, the stress seeped into everything. I slept lightly, listening for sounds that weren't there. I checked gates twice, sometimes 3 times, even though nothing had ever gone wrong. I worry not about fines, but about the animals. False complaints can lead to seizures. Seizures lead to trauma. Trauma changes animals forever. She never once spoke to me directly. Not a knock on the door. Not a conversation. Just filing signatures and silence. When the notice of court appeared, I wasn't surprised. I was ready. But readiness doesn't stop fear. Standing to lose wasn't just income. It was trust, reputation, and the safety of animals who couldn't defend themselves. On the night before the hearing, I walked the daycare alone after closing. Dogs slept curled together. Cats watched quietly from shelves. A senior retriever lifted his head and thumped his tail when he saw me. I sat on the floor and scratched behind his ears, promising silently that I wouldn't let lies take this place from them. The next morning, I put on a clean shirt, packed my evidence, and walked toward a courthouse that didn't yet know how many lies were tied to what she had written on paper. The courthouse was quieter than I expected, not silent but heavy, as if every sound had weight. Shoes echoed on polished floors, papers rustled with importance, and voices stayed low, respectful, restrained. I checked in, sat on a hard bench, and watched people come and go, each carrying their own version of stress. Mine felt different because it didn't belong only to me. It belonged to every animal sleeping peacefully back at the daycare, unaware that strangers were debating their existence. When my case was called, I stood, adjusted my jacket, and walked into the courtroom. She was already there, seated confidently beside her attorney. She didn't look at me. Instead, she stared straight ahead, hands folded, posture rigid, like someone certain they were doing the right thing. That certainty irritated me more than open hostility would have. The judge entered, and everyone rose. He was calm, composed, and unhurried, the kind of presence that made people lower their voices without being asked. When we sat, he glanced briefly at both tables, then down at the file in front of him. It was thick. That alone said a lot. Her attorney spoke first. He described my daycare as a nuisance operation disguised as a home business. He talked about constant barking, unsafe conditions, and fear among residents. He used phrases like quality of life and public safety. As he spoke, I noticed something important. He never mentioned a date, a time, or a specific incident. Everything was general. Everything was implied. When he finished, the judge nodded and turned to me. I stood and introduced myself, stating my role as the owner and operator of a licensed pet daycare. I didn't argue emotionally. I laid out facts. I explained how many animals I cared for, how they were managed, and what regulations govern my work. I submitted my first binder, then the second, then the third, inspection reports, licenses, zoning approvals, noise studies, veterinary partnerships, client contracts. The judge flipped through pages carefully, not skimming, not rushing. Then he asked questions. How often are animals outside? What hours do you operate? How do you handle aggressive behavior? What training do your staff have? I answered each one calmly, confidently, truthfully. I could see her shifting in her seat. Her attorney objected once, claiming relevance. The judge overruled him without irritation. Then came her turn. She took the stand and described how my operation had, in her words, changed the neighborhood. She said she feared for children, that barking was constant, that animals pressed against fences aggressively. When asked if she had video, photos, or witnesses, she said no. When asked for dates, she said she couldn't remember exact days. When asked why animal control had repeatedly cleared the property, she said they must not have looked hard enough. The judge paused. "Ma'am," he said evenly, "you've submitted multiple sworn statements. Are you aware that false statements carry consequences?" She said yes. "Then explain," he continued, "why these inspection reports directly contradict your claims." She glanced at her attorney. He stood and tried to redirect, but the judge allowed the question to stand. She stumbled through an answer about timing and perspective that satisfied no one. Then something unexpected happened. The judge leaned back slightly and asked me, "How did you get into animal care?" I explained how it started with helping neighbors, how it grew responsibly, how animals had always been central to my life. I didn't embellish. I didn't need to. He nodded slowly. "I ask," he said, "because I'm familiar with animal behavior." He looked toward her. "I own dogs," he said plainly. "I foster rescues. I've dealt with noise complaints, exaggerated fears, and misunderstandings about animals." Her face tightened. He continued, "There's a difference between nuisance and presence. There's also a difference between concern and harassment." The courtroom felt different after that. Warmer toward me, colder toward her. The judge reviewed the complaint history out loud. The frequency, the repetition, the lack of findings. He pointed out that agencies had documented compliance repeatedly. He noted that her statements escalated in severity despite contrary evidence. "Volume," he said, tapping the file, "does not replace proof." Her attorney attempted to argue that the sheer number of animals was itself disruptive. The judge asked if there was a legal limit being violated. There wasn't. Then the judge asked a question that landed like a stone. "Did you ever attempt to resolve this neighbor-to-neighbor before filing formal complaints?" She hesitated. "No," she said. "Why not?" "I didn't feel safe." The judge raised an eyebrow. "There is no record of any incident involving you personally," he said. "No report. No emergency call. No injury." She said nothing. I was asked one final question. "What would happen," the judge asked, "if these complaints succeeded?" I answered honestly. My business would close. Clients would lose care. Animals could be displaced or seized. Some would end up in shelters. Some might not recover. He nodded, then called a brief recess. I sat quietly, hands folded, heart steady but heavy. I thought about the animals again. I thought about trust. I thought about how easily words on paper could unravel years of careful work. When the judge returned, his decision was clear. He dismissed the complaints. All of them. He stated for the record that the claims were unsubstantiated, exaggerated, and unsupported by evidence. He ordered that enforcement action cease immediately. He warned against further filings without credible proof. Her shoulders slumped. Her attorney whispered something to her. She stared at the table. But the judge wasn't finished. He addressed the nature of false reporting. He spoke about misuse of regulatory systems. He spoke about the responsibility people have when making sworn statements. His words were measured, not angry, but firm enough to be unforgettable. As the hearing concluded, I felt relief, not triumph. Relief that truth still mattered. Relief that animals weren't voiceless when someone was willing to stand for them. I gathered my binders, thanked the judge, and walked out without looking back. Outside, sunlight felt sharper, cleaner. My phone buzzed with messages from clients who knew the hearing was today. I didn't reply yet. I just stood there for a moment, breathing, knowing the fight wasn't entirely over, but the worst part had passed. And I didn't yet know that the judge had one more thing to say. I thought winning meant walking away free. I was wrong, because the judge wasn't done teaching her what false complaints really cost. I was halfway to the courtroom door when the judge called my name again. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried authority that made everyone stop. I turned confused, binders tucked under my arm, and faced him once more. He looked down at the file, then up at both parties, as if deciding how much truth the room still needed to hear. "This matter is dismissed," he said again, "but the conduct that led here deserves further comment." Her lawyer stiffened. She froze completely. The judge explained that while the court could not punish someone simply for being mistaken, the record showed a pattern that went beyond misunderstanding. Repeated sworn complaints, each escalating in severity, each contradicted by inspections, created something dangerous, not just for me, but for the system meant to protect people and animals alike. He spoke about how animal control resources were finite, how time spent chasing false claims meant less time responding to real abuse. He spoke about reputational harm, about how businesses built on trust could be destroyed by accusation alone. His words were calm, but they cut deeply because they were true. He then addressed the HOA directly, noting that governance did not grant license to harass. He ordered that no further action be taken against my daycare without independent verification from a regulatory authority. Complaints routed solely through her would no longer be considered credible without corroboration. She finally looked up. The judge turned to her. "You signed these statements," he said. "You swore they were accurate." She nodded weakly. "I want you to understand," he continued, "that filing false or exaggerated complaints about animals can lead to unnecessary seizures. Seizures traumatize animals. Some never recover behaviorally. Some are euthanized. This court will not be used as a tool for that." Her mouth opened, then closed. He dismissed us formally. That time, it felt final. Outside, the air felt different. Lighter. I stood on the courthouse steps and finally answered my phone. Messages poured in. Clients relieved. Friends angry on my behalf. One message stood out. A client thanked me for protecting not just her dog, but everyone's pets who couldn't speak for themselves. Back at the daycare, the animals greeted me like nothing had happened. That normalcy was everything. Dogs barked in excitement, not fear. Cats stretched lazily. A nervous rescue pressed against my leg until I knelt to reassure him. This was the life she had tried to disrupt with paperwork. In the weeks that followed, the fallout became clear. The HOA sent a formal notice retracting all allegations. Animal Control sent a letter commending my compliance. New clients joined after hearing what happened, drawn by transparency and trust. Even neighbors who had believed the rumors stopped me to apologize. She avoided me completely. I learned later that the HOA quietly limited her role. Her complaints no longer carried weight. People had seen what unchecked authority looked like, and they didn't like it. But the most meaningful moment came months later, when I received a letter from the court. It wasn't dramatic. It simply confirmed that the record reflected a finding of unsubstantiated complaints and noted the potential consequences of future false filings. It was protection written in formal language. I framed it not out of pride, but as a reminder, because this wasn't just about me winning. It was about a system being tested and holding. It was about animals being spared because someone listened. It was about truth surviving persistence. I still run the daycare the same way. Same routines, same care, same standards. But I'm more aware now of how fragile good work can be when someone decides to lie loudly enough. Every time I hear a bark echo across the yard, I think about how close those sounds came to being silenced by paperwork. And every time I clip on a leash or open a gate, I remember standing in that courtroom, watching a judge who understood animals remind everyone that rules exist to protect, not punish. She wanted control. What she got was accountability. And every animal sleeping safely under my care tonight is proof that sometimes justice is a heartbeat and 4 legs.